a lot of these cases, and at the same time oppressing a lot of the minority in the conversation.
So equal protection really plays a double role here. First of all, equal protection is absent in as much as non-dominant minorities, or in the case of women, majorities, are not permitted to speak to the same degree that the dominant white male is. But also that we don't have the protection from hate speak engaged in by the very same dominant white male, right?
Yes.
So it's really a bifurcated issue, right? Equal protection, the relationship between equal protection and the First Amendment.
Yes.
Both things are going on. So basically, yes, you can say anything at all to women, doesn't matter, because they're only women. And women can almost say nothing back, as we saw with Hillary Clinton, right? Her speech was devalued because she was a woman. Forcefully devalued. Do you think that's an unfair assessment?
It is. I mean, and it speaks true to the reality that we live in. And, it's really unfortunate because when you see that there's, for instance, a dominant ideology and a dominant class in the world, whenever you see an uprising or even an outlash from the minority group of wanting to speak on their ideology and wanting to set forth their agenda, there really is this terror and this outlash of oppression that occurs when that does happen. And I mean, if I even give the example, for instance, after the Cold War, it was assumed that the U.S. had won this ideological battle. And when you see, for instance, in certain countries, in certain societies, when minorities want to rise up and criticize what's going on, you see this systematic oppression and violation of human rights just because of the power an ideology could have. So I think it is important to see both of those sides, and a lot of people lack to see those sides. If it wasn't the Charlie case of whether, yes, he shouldn't have been killed for making and
I think we can all agree to that. I mean,
was hate speech.
Oh, yeah. I think we can all agree, yeah, you don't get killed because you say something nasty. But on the other hand, why are you saying something nasty? I mean, the fact of the matter is French law, or perhaps you don't, French law includes provisions against hate speech, and it was never enforced as against Charlie Hebdo. Here, of course, moving along, Passavant and I part company. Passavant is concerned by the claim that barbarians fail to self-regulate sexual activity for which they are condemned. He worries that white males of European extraction have historically insisted that women in civilized society should be subject to sexual regulation. Therefore, strip joints and pornography should most definitely be protected at any cost. Somehow, it seems, pornography liberates us. No doubt, so does rape. Indeed, a common bumper sticker during the sexual revolution went something to the effect, eliminate rape, just say yes. Once again, I'm holding off a belly laugh here because I find that so terribly amusing. I do not disagree that there was and is something wrong with selecting out women for sexual regulation. It is not at all clear to me why a promiscuous woman is an nymphomaniac, whereas a promiscuous man is merely a stud. But the notion that pornography plays any role whatsoever in liberating women, as was commonly claimed, is on its face absurd. The argument was that pornography somehow attacks the double standard where women are treated as if they, what they do is vis-a-vis sex is bad, whereas whatever men do vis-a-vis sex is actually a good thing. Supposedly, the end goal of the sexual revolution was to demystify sex. In the case of pornography, we apparently demystify sex by demystifying women. Hugh Hefner of Playboy fame was big on claiming he was a feminist back in the day. Again, Ted Bundy warmed up for his next murder with Hustler. Mr. Hefner can at least be absolved in this situation because Mr. Bundy never claimed that he relied on Playboy for his warm-ups. I would suggest, rather than demystifying women and sex, Hustler and Charlie Hebdo and many other similar publications treat them as inanimate sexual objects and ultimately the target of sexual violence. So I am at a loss to understand why Mr. Passavant does not understand pornography, particularly violent pornography, constitutes hate speech. What about the relationship between nationalism and the freedom of speech? The last point Passavant makes numbers among the most interesting. He notes that as an historical matter, the proponents of liberal rights maintain that freedom of speech and other liberal rights are the best defense against the tyranny of nationalism, which was arguably the foundation for Hitler's Germany, Mussolini's Italy, and Hirohito's Japan. Passavant argues that liberal rights and nationalism have always been intimately connected in the U.S. When the U.S. declared its independence from England, it argued that American colonialists had been deprived of their rights as Englishmen. By this claim of being English, they distinguished themselves both from the savages, that is to say, indigenous Americans, that had inhabited this continent prior to our arrival, or prior to the arrival of British or English immigrants, and of course African slaves. They insisted that, insofar as their rights had been violated, they were entitled to rebel against tyranny and establish a separate and independent state. Constructed in this way, the new state, that is to say, the United States, was genetically English, even if we disregard African slaves and indigenous Americans. I should note this was already inaccurate, as there had already been immigrants from other European states as well. But nonetheless, it was genetically English, and therefore the rights that issued from English political culture attached to them, regardless of their geographic location. They were basically making the claim of jus sanguinis, that is citizenship by blood, rather than jus soli, that is citizenship by geographic location. Notably, Donald Trump is attacking this latter category and apparently wants to amend the Constitution to exclude it. And that despite the fact that the latter is the primary foundation for citizenship in the U.S. and is in fact enshrined in our 14th Amendment. It was intended in particular to extend the full rights of citizenship to the recently emancipated slaves, but has application to all individuals born in our territory. Where elsewhere in the world, it is a more inclusive form of citizenship than jus sanguinis, and therefore arguably more democratic. Hence the anchor baby controversy launched or relaunched by Donald Trump. Now, on this basis, Passavant argues that not only is it not true that liberal rights are divorced from and opposed to nationalism, but rather, at least in the U.S., the two have always gone hand in hand, at least in the U.S., as I've said. Therefore, who is a citizen entitled to rights is central to the liberal rights project. But, and I would say accurately, Passavant notes that while African Americans were deemed to be de jure citizens by the 14th Amendment, they were not deemed, in fact, to be de facto citizens either by a constitutional or statutory law until Brown v. Board of Education, or by the actual treatment that they received at the hands of so-called enlightened Englishmen post-Brown. As evidenced by the Black Lives Matter movement, this arguably continues to be true, even though an African American has been inhabiting the White House for almost a full 8 years now. This still is not a post-racial society, as the media claimed immediately after Barack Obama's election to the presidency. And I'm very curious why the media was so big into making that claim. It is curious, was that an expression of optimism? Buoyancy, or was that actually, as it turned out to be, a means of maintaining the status quo? Accordingly, while we define all individuals who are born within the borders of the U.S. or otherwise naturalized through a legal process defined by Congress to be citizens, this is not, in fact, the case in practice. To paraphrase George Orwell, who wrote Animal Farm, some animals are still more equal than others. Hence it was that Martin Luther King's project to redefine de facto American citizenship to include African Americans more broadly. It was the project of the civil rights movement to include as citizens all persons who were not WASPs or who were not otherwise deemed Anglo-Saxon assimilates, but nonetheless were the beneficiaries of de jure citizenship. Interestingly, Martin Luther King was attacked as a communist by many members of the public including, of course, the director of the then director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. He was disadvantaged by the fact that the former Soviet Union made hay of the unequal treatment of black Americans in the US in their propaganda. So how he responded was to retrain the focus by arguing that democratic America, in contrast with the Soviet Union, either recognized or should have recognized the liberal rights of all of its citizens, including, of course, black Americans. Clearly, to the degree that MLK et al. Were successful, our conception of citizen has been extended to include everyone deemed to be a legal citizen of the US, regardless of race, creed, or color. However, the American trend towards exclusivity periodically reasserts itself, as we have recently seen, and certainly true for certain target groups, including, of course, black Americans, but also basically Muslim Americans, I would suggest Roman Catholic Americans. One of the things I think is curious, and we've not commented on, was the Donald Trump's issue about the border dividing the United States and Mexico, merely about Mexicans who happen to be understood to be brown and not white? Or was it also about Roman Catholicism, or perhaps both? As the French would say, in any event, the more we change, the more we stay the same. Any comments? Sorry, I moved that along quickly because I want to be sure that we're done for next week or the week after when we come back from Thanksgiving.
Professor, I think Leslie had to leave early, so she wanted to, are we wrapping up class now? Because she wanted to make a comment about that.
Sure, Leslie, say your piece.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I have to leave. I have to leave now. But I was gonna say that, since we don't have class next week, perhaps the following week we should do another session like this and cover week.
Sorry, can I just ask something? I think just from my personal perspective, Leslie, I think it's better to meet in person.
Okay.
Just that would just be my point of view.
That's
just
fine.
now we're caught up and actually ahead of where.
No.
Well, also I need to make a comment here. Technically, the week after Thanksgiving is... Oh, I'm sorry. The week after Thanksgiving is the 2nd? December the 2nd, is that right?
Yeah.
So we are still a week behind. We still have freedom of worship to cover and freedom from want in order to be caught up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Harry's concern is that we're not meeting in person. Harry, you want to express why that's concerning to you?
Yeah, I think just it's slightly more conducive to sort of class discussion when you meet in person. That's just my opinion. But I'm happy enough on Skype. I think meeting in person is sometimes more better dialogue.
Well, Leslie, would you consider looking into the possibility of finding us a classroom where we could sit for the same amount of time, but physically in person? Would that be a possibility? Or I can just contact Tina Lamb and do it myself. Would that suit you, Harry?
Yeah, sure. I'm just wondering.
Because we do need to do one more catch up.
Professor, just a quick question. What are we making up class time from? Just because we've had 3 makeup sessions, I'm just.
Because we just got really
I
behind.
think, Harry, this week we're supposed to have covered week 11, and we did 9 and 10, so I'm not sure how, but somewhere of this semester we've lost some time. So if we did another 2 weeks in the next session like we did today, whether in person or Skype, then we'd be 100% caught up and have 2 more weeks of class where we'd cover 1 session each. That's clear.
Yeah, it just happened, Harry, that we were apparently very loquacious and we didn't move through the material at the rate that perhaps we should have done.
Okay, sure thing.
Now, one thing I should say is December the 13th, we have a speaker coming, an Indigenous American gentleman or part Indigenous American who is going to be talking about the relationship between Indigenous Americans and environmental human rights. I think it's going to be very interesting. He's going to talk for the first, for most of the course, but most of the class, but he wants to speak for about 45, or leave about 45 minutes to engage in a discussion with you, the class. And then, of course, the last week, week 14, December the 16th, is the wrap-up week. So, do you want me to contact Tina, Leslie, or do you want to do it?
If you can, that would be great. And just ask her about a classroom for the extended time.
Okay, and let's just go ahead and clean up all of our backlog of stuff. It happens, Harry.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay.
I have a question regarding the final. Is
Okay.
it going to be possible to have it on the two options for the earlier date versus the later
Oh
date?
gosh, why do you remind me of that? Yes, I will make it up then over Thanksgiving vacation so that it is available. Wait a minute, it has to be available on December the 9th. So yeah, it won't be available next time we meet, but the following week. So sure, I will maintain those two options intact.
Okay, thank you.
Professor, I just had a question, just so in case this arises in the emails. Next week, we're technically on Thanksgiving break, so when are we planning the makeup session possibly then?
The
'Cause I don't
following
know,
week,
some
right?
people-
The following week would be December the 2nd.
Okay, so that's when we plan to do the two topics and then get caught up on December the 2nd, so that on the 9th.
We have a speaker.
Could we do the same as this week? Because I liked that we split it up 4 and 4. Could we do that again? Because that was really beneficial to read in depth.
Sure, why not? I think that's fine. Everybody good with that? You know what, Harry, why don't you, Leslie just left, so why don't you write to Leslie
I'll
and...
shoot her an email.
What?
I'll shoot her an email.
Right, and could you also shoot me an email to remind me to contact Tina? Lamb,
Okay.
that is. Okay, so we all good? It's 2:55 p.m. We've made a lot of progress, and I'm sorry that we've had to speed through some stuff to make up for lost time. But the point is you guys do speak, which is also part of your grade, and you've done a very fine job with this course so far. Notably, I was also duly impressed with your examinations to the degree that I've read them. I just have a few. Nobody did questions 4 and 5. Everybody did 1 through 3. Nonetheless, you've done a good job so far. Miss Cordova Leon, you need to contact me. As you know, and hopefully I will have in your hands, or at least via the internet, scan the examinations with my comments, so that hopefully you can benefit by them before we get to the final. Okay? Everybody good?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Have a
What?
good weekend, everyone.
Bye. Good weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Happy. Okay. Happy Thanksgiving, guys.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay. Bye.
Thanksgiving.